Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Q&A for Trails to Azure. Those of you who don't know my voice, I am Scott. I am the Geofront's lead editor of the Legend of Heroes Trails to Azure. And earlier this week, I began fielding questions on Twitter for questions about the Azure project and our team and whatnot. And I'm going to answer as many of them as I can in this video. And any ones I don't answer, I will try to follow up and answer on Twitter after the fact. So this will be like two birds, one stone. I'm going to answer your questions in the video, but I'm also going to demo the prologue for you. That's what we're here to do today. To kind of give you guys a proof of concept, because it's been a long time now. It's been a year since we started working on Azure, and just over 9 months since we announced it, and we haven't actually shown that much of the game outside of, screenshots and articles and a few that have gone up on Twitter and whatnot. But this is going to be the first time that anyone in the public has seen the game in motion. So the way this is actually going to work is I'll introduce some of the things about the game and the mod here on the title screen, but once we start actually doing the prologue, I'm going to kick it over to future me, and I'm going to come back and dub over my gameplay and answer the questions as I watch my gameplay back. That's what I'm going to do. So first, let's start introducing the game. Spoiler warning for Trails from Zero. If you haven't played Zero, you haven't finished Trails from Zero, Zero no Kiseki, you probably don't want to watch the prologue of Azure. Azure's prologue will absolutely spoil the story of Zero, 100%. So just a fair warning. So this is the title screen. Let's jump into the second title screen, I guess. And we can jump through some of these menus. So Azure has a backstory menu, which is, I guess Azure was kind of the innovator of that, because this became really common in Cold Steel. I don't remember if the first one has a backstory menu, but definitely 2, 3, and 4 definitely do. But Azure also has one. And I think all of these should be good in terms of not just editing, but the actual programming in them. I think these should all look pretty clean. We're not going to read all of them, but they're here. So these summarize the basically the chapters of the game of Zero and things that happened. You can get your terminology debriefing in this menu. You get some character summaries in this menu as well. And if we jump into options, what people really want to know, we can see this is the non-debug. I made sure to turn debug off, so we won't get any weirdness in here. But Azure's options menu, custom made by us, is obviously going to look a lot like Zero's. So let's go under displays in here. Yes, I want to change my button prompts actually, because I'm not on keyboard and mouse right now. I'm using a DualShock. So you still get your Xbox DualShock Switch Pro and keyboard layouts, whichever you want. Oh, this is interesting. I haven't looked into these in a while, but you see that we have 3 language options. Out of the box, Geofront Azure will support obviously not just English, but it will support the original Chinese that comes with Aonoki Seki. And I haven't talked to any of our programmers in a while exactly how it works, but I believe the Japanese support will be built in the sense that if you have the Japanese scenario from say the PSP build of Aonoki Seki, it should work, I think, if you insert it in. But Geofront Azure will not come with the Japanese bog standard, because it's kind of the same situation with the Evolution voice mods and soundtracks and stuff like that. There is no Japanese PC version of AO as to date anyway. This game wasn't released in Japan the way Zero was for PC. So it would be kind of not cool for us to include that. It'd be a little sketch because legal reasons. But there should be support for it. So if for whatever reason anyone out there that's multilingual, if you want to play Azure in Japanese with our mod, it should be possible. Those people do exist. I've seen people stream Trails from Zero with the Japanese display mode, so I know they're out there. Sound should pretty much be the same as it is in Zero. I do have the additional voices built into my installation. Just like with Zero, you're going to have to supply those yourself. presumably from your completely legitimate copy of Aonoki Seki Evolution on PlayStation Vita. And anywhere else you get those files is none of our business, but the support is obviously there, and I always turn dialogue beeps off. Oops. Let's see, features. You can change your window style. You can choose whether or not you want to skip the Falcom logo at the start. With support for original movies or Evolution movies, you can also turn subtitles on or off if you want. So you can enable the message log, but like, why would you ever disable it? You can set your turbo speeds. I'm a Field 4 Battle 6 kind of guy. Mouse cursor. So we have new cursors actually in Azure. I can't remember if any of them got backported to 0 in the final patch. I'm not sure. But we have a few more. There's Bruhfish. Where is it? Is it not in here yet? Oh, I don't think it's in my build yet. Or if it's not in our build, I'll have to ask someone. There should be like a couple new custom ones that I guess aren't in this build. I'll have to ask someone about that. Atterbury drew at least like 2, I think, at least new ones. One of them's like a real cool crossbell themed one that I like a lot. I don't know why I don't have that. It sucks. Let's see. And about, we are at 0.96.10319. I can't remember what that means. Is that the day we built it? So it's like March 19th, maybe? Or no, our build date's right there. So this one was built on the 20th. And I could turn debug features on or off, but I don't want to do that. Not right now. So let's go in and start a new game. I will play on normal for you guys because I'm not very good at Trails, believe it or not. And this is the important thing that obviously people want to know. Things about save files and whatnot and carryover. Your decisions may be reflected in this game if you load your clear data from the previous game, The Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero. Would you like to load your clear data? Clear data and system data will both be read. Why, yes, I would. So, yeah, you guys would have to ask Ribos exactly how this works because the save system is all his doing. And I know he worked really hard to make sure that, like, bringing in your data from Zero into Azure would be as simple as possible. So here we have clear data that I made. This is my testing run, actually. This is January 9th of last year. This is when I finished testing Trails from Zero. And it says save found in Trails from Zero install. So this save data is not in my Azure install. It's not like carried over into the Azure save data folder, which is what you would have to do if you're playing like any of the previous Aonoki Seki patches that are floating around out on the internet. It should work automatically. Now, me personally, my installations for Zero and Azure are not where they would be by default for most people. I have mine in my Steam folder. So those of you who use Steam, it's like program files, Steam apps, common, something like that. And in the common folder under all your Steam stuff is where like your Steam games are installed. So that's where I have like Trails of the Sky and the Cold Steel games. But I also have my Geofront installations of Zero and Azure. And they're in there, so they're with all my other games. And then I add them to Steam as a non-Steam game and give them the custom artwork and whatnot. Which, by the way, is in the directory of the games we provide you. Those of you who have like Trails from Zero installed, if you like added it to Steam or got Galaxy and you wanted to like put your own custom artwork in there to make it look all pretty, we give you artwork. It's in the directory. There are PNGs and JPEGs of like full res backgrounds and banners and logos and stuff like that that you can use. You don't have to go searching on the internet for them. Zero has them, Azure will have them too. So for me, installing both games in my Steam folder, obviously Azure found Zero no problem. There's my Zero clear data. I can just load it up and carry all my playthrough stuff from Zero. So it carries over quests you did, your final detective rank, a final bonding event partner, if you had one, all of that stuff gets carried over into Azure and will affect certain things in the story I can't remember if you get like bonuses or not. I don't even know my own game's carryover data, but whatever. It's not what I'm paid to do. So who cares? So I'm going to load in this zero query data, and then we're going to play through the prologue, or at least I'm going to play through the prologue by myself now. And then I'll come in and dub in me answering as many of you guys' Twitter questions as I can. And then after the video goes out, I'll answer more questions that I didn't get to. And I'm sure people will have questions in the comments below, and I'll try to remember to get to those too. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things to juggle. I have to juggle my own account. I have to juggle the YouTube account. I have to juggle the Twitter account on top of all the other stuff I do for the game. So it's hard work. Someone's got to do it. So let's play the Azure Prologue. And I'm going to, when I dub over this, I'm going to be like talking over things that happen in the game. Like I'm going to talk over the voice acting. Like it'll be there. You listen in the background, it'll be there. But I'm going to talk over all that stuff. I'll talk over any animations and stuff, like the opening when we eventually get to it at the end. If you want to see the opening, it's also on this channel. I posted it like last year. You can go watch the HD opening to Azure. It's there. Check it out for yourself. But I'm sure I'm already a chatterbug. But when I kick it over to Future Me and he's answering questions, I'm going to chat even more. So hopefully it'll be very enlightening, and hopefully the game looks pretty good. Now, last thing to say before I start playing, everything's subject to change. So if we see something stupid, or if there's a bug or a typo in the text, like obviously the game's not out, one of the other reasons I'm doing this, I could fix it. So everything is subject to change. But I've been through this multiple times. The testers have obviously played through the prologue. A bunch of them have, all of them. So it should look pretty clean and give you an idea of what you can come to expect from Geofront Azure. Let's do it. So this is the start of the game, and fun fact, the very first line of Geofront Azure is a liberty. The very first one. In Japanese, it says something like, a certain month of 1204 of the Septine calendar. Ours says August, because it is in fact August. There is a very concentrated effort in Geofront Azure to make the timing of the game match up with Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 as closely as possible. In editing the game, I have found that it seems like Falcom wrote it with the idea that Azure was taking place from like spring to summer. That seems to kind of be what they were going for, based on like a handful of text boxes that kind of talk about like the seasoning or the weather or whatnot. And that's just not true. Azure takes place from August to December of 1204, and we know this because of Cold Steel 1 and 2. So there's a lot of careful attention paid to make sure that it's consistent with that. So there will be talk about like summer ending and fall beginning, and there might be a little bit about winter. There's a lot of allusion to the events of Trails from Zero, and I usually write something like back in spring, because Zero takes place from January to May, I believe. It's like April, May-ish, and then that's like around when the mayoral election happens. And then the summer just doesn't exist, not in game anyway. Summer is where the in-between time happens, and Azure picks up at the end of summer. So if you don't know like what's going on in the story, like they'll explain it to you. But there is like one thing that kind of takes place in between Zero and Azure. There is a drama CD that came with the like collector's edition on PSP for Azure. It's called Road to the Future, and it just kind of explains why the SSS at the start of Azure isn't together. They all kind of go off and do their own things. Lloyd's training with the 1st Division. Randy's helping out the Bellegarde unit from the CGF. They're rehabilitating after what happened with them in Gnosis at the end of Zero. Ellie's traveling around the continent with her grandfather, doing diplomatic stuff. And Tio went back to Le Mans temporarily to assist the Epstein Foundation. And then you have the start of the prologue here in Azure, where a little team up is designed between the SSS, CGF, 1st Division, and Bracer Guild, and they're on a little mission at the start of this game. So let's start getting to answering questions. As of now, so I'm recording this on, this is Thursday morning, very early Thursday morning. Right now there are 95 replies to that original tweet. Now a lot of these are probably going to be, some of these might not be worth answering in this video, and there are definitely a lot of repeats and stuff like that. So it's not actually that many, but let's get to answering some of these. So I'm using the Geofront account, so if I like your tweet on the Geofront account, that means that I read it and I answered it. Or it was like basically answered in someone else's question, so I just like checked it off. So Ada actually answered this first one on Twitter. Someone asked if there's a physical Japanese release for Azure on PC. The answer is there's not. So this is something a lot of you know, but Azure, like I said, I think in the intro part yesterday when I recorded it, Azure didn't come out on PC in Japan. It only came out in China for the original Joyland PC version. Falcom licensed back the Japanese or the PC version of Zero and released in Japan, and presumably that didn't do very well. It did not sell, and despite the fact someone out there probably bought it and was looking forward to playing Al on PC too, they just decided not to. They decided it was not worth the cost, and only Zero came out in Japan, and that left us in the awkward position of having to localize the Chinese PC version of this game, which is not easy because this game was not easy to acquire. We, as many of you know, lucked out by getting Joyland to sell the license to it via PayPal on their website, and that's just the license. We know that the download process is not great right now. The way it was supposed to be done was hosted on a Chinese website. Right now, we have fans hosting the encrypted, like the DRM protected files that Joyland would give out that you're supposed to like use with your Joyland account to use. That's fine. We will try to think of something more succinct when it comes time to launch the game. It's kind of a mess. Ultimately, the buying thing, it's so that you don't pirate the game, and it's so that we're not liable. That we don't want people stealing the stuff, and we don't want to get in trouble for like piracy and stuff. So kick Joyland $7 or whatever, however much they're selling it for. It's very cheap when you do the conversion rate. It's under $10 US anyway. So pay for the license, and that way you're not pirating, and we don't really care what you do after that. So as far as physical versions go, to like answer the original question, there are physical Chinese versions. I have one. Ada has one. I retweeted someone with the Geofront account like this past week, I believe, who went through the process of tracking one down. I think they pop up on like Taobao from time to time. If you know how to use that, I don't know how to use Taobao. I think Ada's used it. I can't get it to work. They are hard to come by. I think maybe every now and then on like a Japanese auction site, one might pop up of someone with the Chinese version. I got lucky like 3 or 4 years ago, and one just popped up on eBay. That's super unlikely to happen regularly. So physical versions will work with the patch, but like honestly, good luck finding one. That's something we can't really help with. That's totally a shot in the dark. Let's see. Next question. See, I have to like kind of like read these before I start reading them aloud to make sure it's like cool to read it on the video. I'm gonna pass up this one. If you go back in time when you first started working on Azure, would you do anything differently? Are you satisfied with how things turned out? I think we would have announced it earlier. We didn't know what we wanted to do. Well, we know we wanted to do Azure, but we didn't know when we wanted to talk about it. We were thinking that at first that we would just wait until we were not done, but like done with the first pass and we had like something tangible, and then we could like spring it up as a surprise. My first idea was that we were going to say it on the anniversary of OW, which is like September 28, 29, something like that. So we were going to wait through the entire summer. Things happened. Things got a little complicated. There was movement with people messing around with the flame edit of OW, and we had to make the decision of like, you know what, we need to just go public and say we're doing this and not string people along and just let everyone know. So the game got announced in June, and that's what happened. So if I had to go back in time, I would think instead of kind of like bait and switching people and trying to make it a big surprise, we probably would have just said it from the beginning in March that, hey, we're going to do Azure. All right, let's see. Here's a good one that people, at least a couple of people sent one along the lines of this. Did you guys upscale the rest of the cutscenes in the game, or was it just the OP? Also, what software did you guys use to upscale? Very interested. We didn't. The animated OP, well, all of the animations, the ones that are in the new Zero patch 1.1, as well as all the animations in Azure, are not upscaled. None of them. Here's how they work. The OP and ending for Zero and Azure are captures from Zero and Aokai. What happened last year was when Zero and Aokai released on PlayStation 4 for Japan, I bought them and I played through all of them so that we could get clean versions of those and edit them into HD versions of our OP and ending. And the reason I had to play through the entire game, and rather than you know, just wait for them to like happen at the start or at the end or whatever, is because Zero and Ao have this weird feature, bug, unclear, where all animations that play in game have letterboxing on them. They have black bars on the top and bottom, as if it's an event scene in the game, like the one we're watching right now. But the animations themselves aren't letterboxed. They're in full 16:9. But the only way to see those animations in full 16:9 is to either A, like rip them out of the game itself, which at the time was impossible for Zero and Aokai because they were on, at the time, new PS4 firmware, which wasn't hackable, or to beat the game, unlock all of the movies in the extra menu, which unlocks after you beat the game, and watch them there. So that's what I had to do. I had to beat Zero and Aokai, unlock all the movies, and then record them all in-game. And that's how we ended up editing the OP and ending for both. But things have changed since then. Very recently, in fact. Zero Kai launched on Nintendo Switch for Chinese and Korean. The Nintendo Switch is not nearly as secure of a platform as the PlayStation 4 is. So the Geofront has the files for Zero Kai on Nintendo Switch. We have everything. Now, what's in there and is usable is not a whole lot. There's some differences between the old versions of Zero. Falcom or whoever changed the ITP format on a lot of files, so they don't work like the old ones do, so we can't decompile them. Well, we could, but it would probably take a lot of time, and it's time we don't have. So we weren't able to lift a whole lot out of Zero Kai Switch. But we were able to get the videos. Those work. They're just MP4s that are in there. So, Trails from Zero's new videos, the opening and endings are captures. The ones in between are just source files from Zero Kai. And that's how Azure will work. The OP and ending will be captures, and everything in between will be the source files, not from Aokai Switch, but from Aokai PS4. Literally within like the last week, the firmware in which Zero and Aokai released on was jailbroken. And now we have Aokai PS4's files, which is we didn't expect to have before releasing Trails to Azure, but we have them. How useful they'll be, I can't say beyond the videos, but we have the videos. And you guys will get the in-between videos and their source files. And why we don't use the source files for the opening and the ending is because we only have the Chinese versions. We don't have the Japanese ones. We don't have dumps of the Japanese versions. And the Chinese versions have subtitles hard-coded in them, so we can't use them. We have to continue using the capture versions. That and like actually doing the work to localize the OP for Zero and Azure was a lot of work, and I don't want to make anyone have to redo that. So it is what it is. We'll continue to use the kind of janky capture versions. Let's see. Next question. Bugs are always a big thing when it comes to this. Some may be hilarious, while others might be a nightmare. What was the most hilarious bug, and is there a bug that delayed the project the most? So there are a lot of questions about bugs, which we're not comfortable in answering because, like, we don't want to tell you guys like what bugs exactly we're dealing with that are still exist, because it's like, what if we don't fix them? We don't want you guys to know about them. But I can tell you two things. One, a lot of people want like bug blooper reels. That does exist. We have something like that in the works. We've had something like that in the works since Zero. And it kind of got pushed back and delayed, and we got caught up with other things. So what ended up happening is that we just ultimately rolled them together into one, into where someday there will be just a big compilation of bugs from both games. We haven't decided exactly like what the format of that's going to be. It might end up being like an article or a slideshow. It could end up being like a podcast format. We're not entirely sure. We haven't committed to anything, but we are going to do something like that someday. But as far as Azure and like big bugs that we've had in the last like couple of months, I can talk about this one now because it's fixed. Probably the worst bug we had when we started testing, in terms of it being all the time, experience ruining. I'm really sorry that the testers have had to play with it for so long. Is we had a bug where sound effects would continuously loop. So like a sound effect would play like in a cutscene, and it just wouldn't stop. It wouldn't cut off. It would just keep going and going and going. And this is especially problematic with certain sounds, like, for example, gunfire. Someone would shoot a gun, and that gun would just go on forever and ever and ever until, like, the scene would change. So there were a few scenes in the game that were just ruined by this bug. This is the kind of thing that's like, no, we can't possibly release the game with this crap happening. It's embarrassing. And I, myself, as well as everyone else who has been testing, had to just power through that for like over 2 months, and it recently was fixed. Thank goodness. There are a lot of other bugs in the game, things that are more minor. Some of it's just like checklist bugs where it's like, we have to do this thing, we know how to do it, but we just haven't gotten around to it. It's like, the crossbell times is kind of janky, to be honest. Like, we'll never release the game without fixing that. Like, text is like overlapping with images, like, because the images aren't being placed in the right spot in the newspapers, stuff like that. So there's a lot of like these weird non-scenario files that have to be like decompiled and fixed. Like, I'm not an expert in how that works. I just know like it has to be done. I know Jose and Ribos can do it. They know how to do it. And it's just more of a matter of like there being so many things to do that that those particular things haven't been gotten around to just yet. Let's see. What's been the most difficult phrase or idea to localize, and what decisions have been the most difficult to make, or the team has spent the most time arguing, debating? There are a few, like, anytime when there's a term that's not in anything else, things become difficult. Now, Cold Steel 4 helps us out a lot, where there are a lot of new things in Cold Steel 4 that weren't in Cold Steel 3 that pertain to crossspell. So we get to lean on that and just say, go with whatever Nisa picks, and it's that simple. But there's still a lot of things that we have to do ourselves. Like, there are some scenes in this game that are, like, you know, this is the end of a Kiseki arc, so there are some really heavy lore scenes where it's like, we got to do it ourselves, and it's got to be the best it could be, and the material we're working with isn't the easiest to parse, and I think we've done it, and I'm happy with how those big lore dump scenes have turned out. I think they're good to good enough, but they are hard. But like some smaller things, nicknames are hard to decide. In this game, there are some new nicknames handed to characters. Sergey has a nickname in this game. It's like the one he used to have when he was like younger on the police force. Like, the one we have is not the one that, oh, look at this, in the video just now. You see what I did there? I shook my head no, because that was me saying, I'm not going to read any chess messages in this video. I'm sorry. Anyone that was looking forward to chess messages, nope. Most of them are in the game. I think all the ones in this dungeon are in the game, but nope. No chess messages, spoilers, play the game. So yeah, some characters get nicknames. Sergey gets his. We don't use the one that's like in the current owl that's floating around out there. We wrote our own, which in my opinion is much, much better. Some other characters get names and stuff like that. But I think maybe the thing that was in debate the longest and we kept putting off was the names of the chapters. Some of them are really straightforward. There are a few where it's like, oh, it's this. It's like, it's called this. Others we really had to think about. And like a few of them are not what people know them to be today, because like there are working English titles that are in the current version of OWL, and people have like probably on Kiseki Wiki to date and stuff like that. Some of them they're not even remotely the same. They're in the spirit of like the original Japanese, but they're not the same. And the one that's the most difficult is probably the name of the final chapter. The name of the final chapter does not translate well to English at all. It kind of sounds like gibberish when you literally translate it from Japanese to English. It doesn't make perfect sense when you first hear it. It does have a connection to the story, and it comes up near the end of the game. So anyone that is super familiar with HAL, is watching this, listening to this, we know the significance of it. Like we know what it means, and we know how it ties into the ending. It's not lost on us. But the name we chose ties into that ending in a different way and keeps the spirit of what Falcom was going for alive. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. Play the game. That's been a secret that we've been keeping, what the name of the final chapter is, because we like it a lot and we're very proud of it. Very, very proud of it. And I picked it. It was probably one of the things I'm like most proud of that I named in this game. Let's see. What would be the smallest decision or change which snowballed into a big problem later in the process? And this is half related, but planning to... am I planning to finish my playthrough of Zero now on my personal channel? I don't know. That's completely on hold right now because my life's really busy between this as well as other stuff going on in my personal life. So I'm kind of caught up on, or I'm kind of in a rut with YouTube stuff. Things that kind of like snowballed and made our lives harder. I mean, this is going back to Zero, but definitely like the CSPD and CPD naming. Once we picked CPD, which we fully stand behind and were validated by NIS America, they also picked that for Trails of Cold Steel 4. It's, I think, the right decision, but it leads to a lot of texture edits on the sign in front of the police department, the police cars, people's Enigma covers, so many things where having to pick one thing leads to us having to change a bunch of other stuff. And that's how things go sometimes. And there are other things that lead into that sort of decision where it's like you pick a name for something and like, oh, it turns out that thing is in graphics and textures, and now that leads to a bunch of texture changes and making sure all that's right. It's definitely like an annoying process that snowballs on itself. What's the coolest, most interesting thing you feel like you've learned about the game from the process? I mean, definitely like the bugs that are in the original version, which has happened a lot, where we discover like a bug and we're like, oh no, what did we do? We broke the game. And then I like go boot up, or like Ada will go boot up the PSP version of OW, and I'll go boot up Alkai on PS4, and we find out it's in every version. And we're like, oh no, Falcom's just kind of dumb. That's in all of them. It's not our fault, thank goodness. And we work hard to actually fix those if we can. We will correct bugs that are not just in like the Joyland version, but are in all the Falcom versions. And let me tell you, we've learned that we jokingly say that Aono Hiseki is held together by like bubble gum and paper clips. It's really obvious that Falcom rushed this game out, that they were crunched to do this in a year turnaround from Zero. And underneath the surface, when you get to know like some of the dark secrets in the game and the bugs and actually like how the scenario works, you learn that like, yeah, they definitely rushed this one out, and there were some problems with it. We've learned a lot of interesting things about it. Do you think the localized nicknames are better or worse than the Japanese versions? Well, they're different, and they have to be different. So, with Nisa doing Cold Steel 3 and 4, and Randy being in those games, that sort of set a precedent for how Randy's nicknames work. And are we at the point where... I think we're at the point where... do we even have any Randy nicknames we've written ourselves? I don't think we do. I think there were a couple that he has that weren't used in Cold Steel 3, but were set in 4, and they've been set at this point. So, yeah, we are at the point where less and less are things that we have to write ourselves, and like to me they're fine. Like definitely like we get attached to our own things. Like I'm not gonna say whose it is, but there's like one character where I was like, oh, I really liked ours instead of theirs. I wish it would have been ours, but that's okay. Some of them like really grow on me. I think Mademoiselle has grown on me. I've never had a problem with Teotot. I really liked Pomyo, which we had for Zero, but it's now Pom Party or Pom Pom Party, the full name, for the mini game. That grew on me. I think the one that's been toughest to accept has been Ilia's, the Fervent Dancer. Like, I understand like why they picked that one, because like the more like original meaning of the word fervent, because it does have like a kind of like an archaic connotation to like temperature, like heating up in addition to being passionate. So it's like the two ideas intertwine, being passionate to the point where it's like feverishly so. So I get why they picked that. But just for my money, I feel like it doesn't roll off the tongue very well. It sounds like a little awkward to me. And I still like what we had, which was the Blazing Dancer. But, you know, what can you do? Most of them, though, I'm fine with. Luckily, we get to keep a few. Like, we get to keep Sergei's nickname, which I like a lot. And there's another character in the game who's new to Azure who gets a couple of nicknames. And we get to keep those because he's, thus far, as far as Kaseki's concerned, he's Azure exclusive. Simple question. Is there a way to access debug mode in the final build? For Zero, you can. We don't advertise it much, but you can actually enable it in the config.ini, or ini, however you pronounce it. And in our test builds of Azure, you can turn it on and off whenever you want, but I imagine I haven't asked, but I imagine Jose and Ribos will just do the same thing they did with Zero and make it a thing you have to enable in the config, and that'll be that. But yeah, anyone can use debug if you want to be a filthy cheater and cheat your way through the game, or if you just want to get goofy and check a lot of like weird things and event jump and do stuff like that. It is in there. If I had to be honest, I would say that like I'm not super like a fan of that, but that's Jose and Ribos's domain, and they wanted to keep it in because they're that's their decision, and I respect it. So sure, if you want to use debug, you can. Do you have any advice for getting used to writing different types of character voices in translation? Are there any characters that were hard, easy to find the right voice for? I think the hardest character to write for is actually Lloyd, believe it or not. Lloyd and Ellie are the hardest to write for, because I feel like every other character in at least the new SSS, they're all at extremes. Randy, Tio were, I think, the easiest to write for Zero, and Noelle and Wazi, for me, are easy to write for in Azure. But Ellie and Lloyd are like kind of in the middle, so they're a little more difficult. I recently had this conversation with someone about writing characters, and Lloyd in particular. And the decision I came to is that Lloyd is easiest to write when the characters around him are good. So Lloyd's the straight man, and he works well bouncing off of Randy and then Wazi in this game. And as long as you write the extremes well, as long as you write Randy and Tio and Wazi, and even Noelle in terms of like, to me, Noelle is the extreme and like the opposite direction of those characters, and like how straight and narrow she can be and like kind of oblivious at times. So as long as you write all those characters like well, then I think like Lloyd is better for it, and so is Ellie. So it's hard to explain. Like after so long and so many hours of doing it, you just kind of have an idea of what this character sounds like in your head and how they talk and how they act. It's definitely true for it really comes natural for like Randy and Tio. It was not hard to get it down for Wazi and Noelle, and it just kind of like comes naturally even with Lloyd and Ellie. You have an idea of who they are, and I don't know. It's a difficult process to explain other than it takes practice. It's not something you just sit down on your first sheet and get right. And then it also makes sense like why when it comes time to go through things a second time, you see your like early sheets or early writing for the first pass of Azure, and it's like, oh, it's really rough. We can do better here. Let's do better. Someone asked a not relevant question for us about East versus Trails. When's it coming? The answer is after Azure. I can't speak for the V sector, but the answer is after Azure. Everyone has been fully committed with Azure coming out first. The lead writers of East versus are were testers for Trails to Azure, and yeah, once Azure's out, we will, as a whole, begin focusing on East versus and making sure it gets finished. The barriers for East versus are mainly technical, fixing a few outstanding bugs and inserting text for some new test builds and stuff like that. The game's really pretty close to being done, but it just needs a few extra things to help it get over the hurdle. And hopefully after Azure releases, we can all focus on it, and hopefully Geofront having completed Zero in Azure, I anticipate will be at height in terms of visibility and popularity, because we have new people coming into the fandom every day, every week. We see new people discovering Geofront Zero all the time. So I haven't felt particularly rushed to see like East versus come out for the V sector to be rushed, because I think them waiting and coming out after Azure will be good for East versus. It'll get more people to play it, and I hope more people do play it, because it's a really cool game and it's a lot of fun. It's like getting online multiplayer working. Hopefully it'll be a little bit of like a cult hit among Falcom fans that haven't had a chance to really play it until now. So soon, sometime this year. I got a technical question about figuring out how like text, taking it out of the game and inserting it works and stuff like that. I'm not the person to ask. That's definitely a Ribos Jose question. Like, I know a little bit. I know that like I wrote about a bit about the format we're on for the most recent Zero article, about it being at least like taking the text out of the game is based on ED decompiler, which someone else made. It was originally a tool made for like modding Trails in the Sky and the Crossspell games. And when I say modding, I mean like gameplay modding. But it also decompiles the scenario files. So it results in a really clean extraction of the both game scenarios. And then I think like the build process is, I can't remember if it's based on that or if it's something Ribos himself has designed. I know like that our non-scenario building is very unique. If I remember correctly, Ribos like built his own version of that during Zero's development, because he wasn't satisfied with the old tools that were used for like the old translation that was designed by the original programmer. Oh, so on this line that I highlighted about the lower sector of the Geofront, these archaisms they're about to fight, that's the unique text flag that's dependent on doing the New Game Plus dungeon in Zero. So, because this carry data I brought into Azure has the that in the query data, I played New Game Plus and did that dungeon. You got this unique text about these archaisms being from that. Were there any localization challenges that occurred which required further research? Back in Zero, you mentioned a case with the Bracer Guild in Ardent, the one in Ramiferia. Things we get to research. Yeah, there are a lot of weird terms and names that are used near the end of this game. And we had to... The problem wasn't translation, it was the etymology. And it was kind of like understanding, okay, what was Falcom inspired by when they picked this name? And Do we want to change it? Do we want to keep it as is? Is it fine if we keep it as is? There's a lot of debate on that. And a lot of it ended up staying what Falcom chose, which I guess we were fine with. It's definitely like an interesting process because like Xseed and Nisa have to and have gone through this with their releases where like they have to decide an English name for something that like Falcom had like an English analogous name for that was based on like etymology of some thing they were inspired by and say like Greek mythology or Norse mythology, and then the English localization team has to decide like how faithful that is and whether or not that's going to, you know, carry over well into an English version. So we had to do the same with like some stuff that's in like Azure's Final Dungeon and stuff like that, and that leads to a lot of external research and is kind of time consuming and a little annoying, but hopefully the decisions we made with that stuff will be good and people will respect and appreciate those decisions. What is the step-by-step process for translating one line of dialogue in the game? Technical and non-technical aspects appreciated. I want to learn how a process like this goes. It seems so simple, yet I feel it is more difficult than it would initially seem. So the technical process versus like the translation work, which was mainly done by Gurin. Our format on how we actually edit the game's text is really clean. It was messier with Zero, which I talked about in the Zero article, where basically in the old Zero format, every text box in the game was a the text box was designed or divided between lines. So say you have a text box that has 3 lines of text in it. Every line would be a cell in the spreadsheet. So you'd have like codes next to them that would say like, this is a line break, this is a line break, this is terminal code, meaning this is the end of the text box. And then if it's someone talking and they have multiple text boxes, then it would advance the text box to the next one with a page break code. I know this doesn't like jump well into an audio format, but it was a really messy format, and this is how in that article I spoke about how we accidentally would change the number of text boxes in the game, and it's because of that old format where you had to make sure that the codes next to the text boxes to the cells were always accurate, that you were line breaking when you were supposed to line break, when you were putting a terminal code where you're supposed to, you're putting a new page break where you're supposed to, and if those codes were wrong, then the text box alignment would be not faithful to what it was in Japanese, and that would lead to bugs with the voice acting. It was really stupid. But with the new format, with Zero and Azure currently on, it's much simpler, where one cell is a text box, and that's it. There are codes that go along with it that, you know, talk about like who's talking and the portrait that goes along with the text box if it's a character that has a face, things like that. And there are sometimes other codes that change like the shape of the text box if it has like really big font or really small font, or things that change the color. Those will go in separate coding columns. But the actual text itself is like really simple. Like a text box like this one, it's just one line. And if you want to put a line break in the box, then we use Google Sheets because it's online and we can share it between multiple people across the world. You just hit Control-Enter and that does a line break in the same text box. And it's really simple. And we're very fortunate because like official localizations sometimes don't have formats that are that clean, that are kind of messy. But that's the way it goes. Alright, where was I? I'm now on my second take of this. I took a break to get some food. I was starving. So let's get back to questions. Japanese puns or cultural jokes tend not to translate well over into English. How do you and your team localize these jokes? That's a good question. There are definitely some examples of this in OW. And I am not real appreciative of how they were handled in the version that's currently floating around out there. There are some instances where they're not localized at all, and like literally the Japanese is like kept in the script and like written in parentheses to like try to explain the Japanese pun, and it's really bad, and it's really not acceptable. So in those instances, what I try to do is find an English equivalent. I don't want to spoil it because it's a good line, but there's an instance of this that happens around the middle of the game at Tangram Gate, where one of the guardsmen says a thing, and it's a Japanese pun, and the party like kind of reacts to it like, "Oh, dude, really? Did you just make that pun?" And in the Japanese, it's an accident. And he goes, no, wait, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean to make a joke. And they're like, yeah, sure, okay, buddy. But that's not how we wrote it in English. Instead, like, I thought it'd be easier to just turn into it and like, no, what if we just have him make the pun? And instead everyone's like groaning like in the same way of like, really? Did you just make this joke? And he's like, what? I thought it was funny. So yeah, it's kind of a hard thing to explain, but like those things happen, and sometimes you just have to write around it. And if you can write something that's kind of like an equivalent in English, go ahead and do that. But other times it's not really possible. Like one of the things that comes up in Azure is discussion about military ranks and the way the CGF works, and it has to do with like the way it's written in Japanese is that like the ranks the CGF uses, they're not normal ranks in terms of like a standard military like chain of command, and later they switch to something that is like more formal, but the way it's explained in Japanese just doesn't translate at all in English, because at the end of the day, like the words that are being used in English to describe those ranks, like sergeant major, second lieutenant, etc., they remain the same, even though like technically there's been a change in like the Japanese words used. And instead, rather than try to like translate it and edit it in a way to where you keep that like word change the same, you just write around it and explain that like the way the day-to-day works is now more like a standard military chain of command rather than like a state guard. So it's very strange, and those kinds of things pop up from time to time, and you just gotta find a way to make it make sense in English. Well, here's a popular question that a lot of people have asked, that we've answered several times. We've answered it on Twitter and in articles, but there's no harm in answering it again. I'm sure we will continue to answer it, but are there any plans to work on the Steam releases by Clouded Leopard of Zero and Al-Kai this year? And the answer remains no. We're not going to touch them. If people want to try to mod in what we've done into those versions, which I imagine they will, that's up to them. Like, from what I've seen up to now, yeah, I believe it'll be possible to get the text in. Everything else, no. I don't think it's going to be possible to get like the core of the mod in, not the, quality of life things and the message log and the settings menu and all that stuff. I don't think that's going to be possible, and it's not something we really want to do. It would be a lot of work, and even though we all love Steam, we're a team full of PC gamers, but that additional convenience of trying to buy it on Steam for what's ultimately the same game that we've worked really hard on, it's too much work without a lot of return on investment. So nope. And I guess this is a good time as any to answer another question that is not in front of me, but I know a lot of people have asked about like the other versions of Zero now, the PSP version, the Vita version, the Evo. The answer is also no. We said last year that the plans to do Trails from Zero on PSP were dropped. There's never been any plans to do Zero Azure Evolution. There are people separate from us that are working on those mods on a GBA Temp, famous forum for like console modding. There's a thread dedicated to Trails from Zero Evolution, people working on putting the text into the Evo version. And I stopped by there recently because I had some concerns about, unlike PSP or even the Kai releases, the Evo releases have a lot of additional text in them. They have, each game has like multiple quests that are exclusive to Evolution, which leads to a lot of new text. And I was concerned about, well, how's the translation of that being handled? How's the editing being handled? Is it consistent with the style guide? And I haven't seen any of that text for myself, but it probably should be fine. Little did I know that our own lead translator, Catasplurch, had offered to proofread through it, so I trust him. And if he's proofread it, I'm sure he's done, at the very least, the bare minimum to make sure that it's consistent enough with what we've already written. So there are people working on those mods separate from us. Good luck to them. And the simple answer of like why not is because as far as Trails from Zero is concerned, you had a choice. Did you guys want Trails to Azure or did you want Zero on PSP and Vita? Because we couldn't do both. There just wasn't time. It takes a lot of programming work. Ask the people that are making those mods and working on those versions. It's not drag and drop. You don't just drop files into it and boom, it works. Like, no, there are a bunch of bugs. I believe, like, what we suspected is there would be tons of text overflows because of constraints on those versions versus the PC version. And it would just take a lot of additional work. It would probably take another 6 to 12 months of our lives to make that a reality. And did we want to do that, or did we want to work on giving everyone Azure? And the answer was we wanted to do Azure. Especially because with the release of Zero Now Kai in Japan last year, we became concerned of like, well, what if we're on a timer here? We don't know if they're going to be localized. They could be localized. And we kind of felt like, well, this is now or never. This isn't something we can wait on for a few years and come back to. If we're doing Azure, we got to do it now. And that was it. That's why we only worked on the PC versions and nothing else. Let's see here. Unfortunately, Twitter has like mixed up some of these orders, so I'm glad I'm liking these with the Geofront account to know which ones I have and haven't done. Another one about bugs. There's another one about Steam versions. Were there any features that you as a group wanted to implement in Zero or Azure but were unable to? Yes. There was something that sometime last year we tried to do that didn't work out, and that was resizing the text boxes to look more like the Kai releases. So the Kai releases, because Zero Now originally were obviously designed for PSP, so the UI scaling on all the old versions of the games are done with handheld in mind. And that includes the PC version. Like, the text boxes in Zero and Azure on PC are really big compared to the PC releases of Trails in the Sky. And that's because Zero and Azure Joyland ports are just straight PSP to PC ports. They didn't do anything to change the size of the UI or anything. It's still scaled with handheld in mind. So it's kind of oversized. Seeing what the new ports, the Kai ports did, we thought, well, like, can we scale it down to look a little cleaner? And we experimented with that for a while, and it just kind of didn't work out. It was more complicated than it was worth. It was a good example of the butterfly effect in that even once we kind of thought we had something going and had it looking correct, it just affected too many other text rendering things in the game, and it just wasn't worth it. So we scrapped the idea. And the big boy text boxes stay, and that's just the way it's going to be in our versions. It would have been a cool feature, but we couldn't get it to work the way we wanted it to. How tiring, time-consuming, and complicated has this final debugging/testing process been compared to the rest of the project? Very, for me personally. Well, it's a different kind of stress. The second pass was really stressful for me. When I wrote the article for January, I was going into that just completely torched. I was so burnt out. I had stepped away from the Geofront Discord server to finish the second pass because I had to just decompress and get away from a lot of the things that were happening with the project, namely testing. I felt like I couldn't be around for the majority of the testing process and what our testers were doing, so instead I left it to the other editors to take care of that while I went into my own little world and finished my playthrough and finished the second pass. And that was a really hard time. I was very worn out at the end of that. And now the testing process is stressful in a different kind of way, in that I feel very helpless during the testing process, because now things are largely out of my hands and out of my control. Like, there's still things I can do to improve the game. I could still dive in every now and then and play a section like this one in the video and find like some lines I want to change or reword or change the line breaks. And when I see some of the reports from testers, I look at a line and I go, yeah, that's bad, I want to reword this. But the majority of the work that's left is in the hands of Jose and Ribos, and I just don't have the skill sets they do, and I just have to sit back and trust them and believe that they're going to get the job done, which obviously they're more than capable of. But it's also like stressful as an editor, as, you know, seeing Azure as my baby, to, you know, kind of just feel like I've done everything I can do and I just have to be patient, you know, do a little bits and, you know, contribute any way I can from here on out, but the bulk of the work is out of my hands, and it gets frustrating sometimes, especially when there are like major bugs that are like holding us up. It's like, I wish I could fix it myself, but I literally don't know how to. That's way beyond me. I just have to trust them and believe they'll get the job done, and that's what they've been doing. They do a good job. Does Randy take the Orbital car out to do burnouts? So first of all, spoilers. What Orbital car? Second of all, no, Noel won't let him. How many chess quote submissions did the team end up getting, not counting holdovers from zero? So the team is in us. A lot. Man, I feel dumb. I should know what the exact number of chess messages in the game is, but I don't. I think it's like close to 300 or something. Really, Zero and Azure actually have not that many chests compared to Trails in the Sky. Like, I know someone who's been playing through SC, or like beginning an SC playthrough recently, and categorizing all the chest messages in that game, because I believe there's like a Steam achievement tied to it. And it's complicated. There are a lot of chests. There's like over 500 or something in SC. I know there's a ton in third. Zero and Azure are a fraction of those. I think like Zero and Azure are both around like 300. So it's not nearly as much in comparison. So from us, the answer is a lot. We've probably written, the Geofront's probably written over half of them this time. I think I've written like 100. Yeah, I think I've written like 100 chess messages in this game. This is something we warned about when we were opening submissions, that we couldn't make any promises about how many fan ones are going to get in. Unfortunately, like, because I was the one that did the vetting process of the chess on both Zero and Azure, I knew what to expect the second time around in terms of the fan submissions. And the truth is, like, we have high standards, so like a lot don't make the cut, but also there are so many like repeat ones, duplicates, ones that are either the exact same joke or along the same lines of the same joke. So finding like really unique ones that are either like clever or a really good idea or something, they're few and far between. And what I have found is that writing chess messages is like, it's a talent. Like, you either have it or you don't. And what ends up happening is that people that are really good at it will submit a lot of messages and they'll get a lot in. So, like, my goal was always just put the best ones in. It doesn't matter who wrote them. If someone writes 10 that are good enough to get in, then that person's going to get 10. And I'm not trying to like, you know, be fair and be like, no, you only get one. It's like, I don't care. I just want the best ones. So there are some people that are like really good at it. And like some of them, Like, there was one person who wrote like 3 or 4 and they all got in, and I was like, dang, I wish this guy wrote more because they were all really good. And that's just the way it is. So that's the way the chess messages work. I wrote a lot, Atterbury wrote a lot, and we also warned, I think in the January update I wrote that our chess messages are going to be a little different this time around. We've set some aside for some creative usage. I don't want to spoil that. You guys will find out when you play the game. So they're a little bit different from Zero, and I think they're really good. I think the 300 or so that we have for Azure are real bangers. I think it's really special. I selfishly think they're probably the best of any Trails game. That's just me. And we'll let everyone play and find out for themselves. But definitely we can't make everyone happy with chess messages. There are people that like really hate Zero's messages, to which like I don't care. To be honest with you, like if you hate Zero's messages, I'm like, well, that's too bad for you, man. You don't have to press A again and click on the chest and read the thing. It's completely optional. Our chests are what they are, and we like them a lot. And I like Azure's even better than Zero's. I think Azure's are really clever, really funny, informative, and definitely have a lot of love in them. You can tell that they are written for diehard Trails fans, and if you're a diehard Trails fan, especially if you've played Trails in the Sky where the tradition started, I think you're really going to appreciate what we've done in Azure. Any plans on future minor patches in case Hajimari's eventual localization ends up changing jargon? No. Simply put, Hajimari will undoubtedly get localized. I don't think it's going to be this year. It'll probably be mid to late 2022. So the answer is no. We said in the January post that we're getting out of the game. That's after some time this year, we're just going to move on from Crossbell. It's, for one, we don't know, is there going to be an official version? Are we going to become outmoded? Maybe. Perhaps. So if that happens, there would obviously be no point, but I don't know. I just don't see it happening. It's a lot of work to keep up with Crossbell. We all want to do different things by this point. Azure might get one patch, a hot fix patch a month or two after the fact when it releases to fix any major bugs and some text bugs and stuff like that. But I don't expect us a year from Azure's release to be putting out a big feature update the way we did with Zero. I think Azure will get one thing tops, and then we will take a bow and focus on whatever's next, because there are definitely other things we want to do. What was some of your favorite moments while working on this project? That's hard. I think there are some things that have happened in the last year that we would be more comfortable talking about once it's over. Some interesting things, but I would say, that first day when I even had the spreadsheets in hand and I started editing text for this dungeon, actually, I intentionally started with the prologue dungeon, and I was doing it. I was like, oh, I'm editing Trails to Azure. It's oh, it's crazy, because for me, I wrote about this when we announced the game last summer. Those of you who have followed the Geofront long enough, or you followed me long enough, I wasn't part of Trails from Zero from day one. I came in late on the fact. I came in the late stages of Zero to help get it across the finish line. So I was in the same position that all of you watching are in. I was on the outside looking in. I was eagerly awaiting the Geofront's Trails from Zero for years, just like everyone else was. And there came a point in, I believe, 2018, where I had early that year played Al for the first time. And this was before the Gurren release of Ao no Kiseki. It was way before the Flame edit and all that other stuff. The original version of OWL I played was a combination of Kitsune's work. Kitsune, who many of you know from the like Cold Steel 3 for Hajimari spreadsheet projects, as well as he did spreadsheets for Zero Now too, and part of his work for OWL was like adopted by Gurren and Flame's team and used in the basis of OWL's translation. So his work on OWL was like, it was just a spreadsheet, and modders out there took it and implemented it into the PC version of the game, combined with machine translation, because it was just in a translation of like the main story and some quests. It certainly didn't touch like the NPCs and all that stuff. So that's what it was. It was so jank and broken, and there were overflows everywhere. It was a terrible experience, and I still loved it. I was like, whoa, this game's great. I was like, I think this is the best Kiseki game, even though the experience of like playing it like that the first time was terrible. So I knew then and there, like I wonder if the Geofront will ever get around to doing Azure. And like, I already then was like, wouldn't it be cool if I got to do that with them? And that's how I ended up meeting Zerk and Ribos in like early 2018. Was just, I was one of those people, the random guy out of the blue of like, hey, so do you guys like need help on that someday? And like, of course I was super ignorant, and I had no idea how long it was going to take them to finish Zero. That Zero at that point was still 2 years away. I had no way of knowing that. But that's how I got to like know and meet them, and from there on I just kind of like made a name for myself among like within the community, and kind of built a reputation of like being like this lore guy, this encyclopedia guy on Trails, and especially super knowledgeable about like how the localizations worked. And eventually I wormed my way in one way or another, somehow pulled that off, and then it happened early last year. We got serious about doing Azure, and I just kind of took the bull by the horns and was like, nah, I don't care about Kai releases or potential localizations. Like, this is my thing, and if I do it fast enough, then no one can stop me. And that led to me becoming the lead editor. And it's like, in retrospect, it's pretty crazy that like this thing that I wanted in 2018 kind of came true, and now here we are 3 years later, like almost 3 years to like the date the first time I ever talked to Zerker. We were like about to release Geofront Azure, and I like wrote it. It's like pretty insane to me still. It's crazy to think about all the things that have happened. Simple question: did you enjoy working on Azure, and what you guys added to it? Yes and no. like definitely, like I'm really proud of Azure. There's a time period like when Second Pass ended a couple months ago where it was actually really tough to look at the game. I was so sick of it. I was so burnt out, and like I was depressed and really hurting at the time, and I just was dreading all the bugs that were in the game, and like, is it going to come out? When's it going to come out? I was really in a bad way. And then I saw some of our testers playing the game, and I saw one of them basically play through the entire thing. I watched them in like Discord screen share, play through most of the game, and like definitely like the last half of the game in its entirety. And that was when it kind of like hit me, and I was like, oh man, this is really good. Like, we kind of killed it. I'm really proud of what we did. I've been talking to Adaberry a lot, because he's my right-hand man in this project for sure. And we had a conversation like a week or two ago, and we were talking about Azure and comparing it to Zero. And the conclusion we came to, and I say this with like all due respect to like the older statesmen on our team, and especially the older editors, Zerk and Arvin, we just said Azure hits different. Azure's different than Zero. And respectfully to Zerk, I think Azure's way better than Zero. Azure's really good, guys. It's really freaking good. So I'm man, I can't wait for you guys to play it. I can't wait to kind of like redefine the expectations of like what we can do and raise the bar even higher and do this game justice like it hasn't been done before. Like, people think it's good now. Like, just wait until you play Geofront Azure. It's the way people are going to talk about this game in the coming year after it releases. It's going to be wild. People are going to rave about it. It's going to be special. So I'm really looking forward to it. Has the team had a specific contested translation? Maybe like a specific line that people saw differently? How do things like that get resolved? How do they get resolved? Not easily. Eventually, like, someone's will has to win out. We've definitely had like things we bumped heads about. Usually it's not so much like the translation or the intent of what's being said, but how it should be handled. So, like, sometimes we push the line, we push the boundary of, like, what we're writing and, like, what we can get away with. And so there have definitely been some times where, like, I pushed the boundary and my other editors have been like, I don't know about that one, dude. Maybe, like, turn it down. Like, you're at 11, maybe, like, turn it down to 7 right now. And I've been like, oh, come on, guys. Like, let me have this one. You guys got to have this in 0. Let me have this one. And I've lost a few of those arguments. I've been like, fine. And I will come up with something that's also acceptable, but I like. So I've had to do that a few times. But I've also, like, overruled some things where I was like, no, I like this line how it is. I know I did it on purpose. It's going to stay here. I'm the lead, and I get to call the shot sometimes. I will pull that card if I feel really, really justified. I've had to pull it a few times, not too many. It's definitely some compromises. Usually cooler heads when it comes to editing will prevail. And there are definitely some things that have been like toned down in like second pass and in testing where it's like, okay, maybe not this. And then some other things where it's like, nope, I like it how it is and it stays. Are you planning on doing a demonstration run on your YouTube after you finish out 0? I think I answered something like that. Maybe someday I'd like to do that, but it's just not on the plate right now because of how busy I am. My favorite chess message. Well, I'm not going to spoil any from Azure. I think I definitely have like a few in Azure where I'm like, oh, that one's really good. And I know it's really good when I read it and I'm like, oh, that one's going to make people mad. Because like I said, there's the people that really don't like the chess messages. And like every now and then we come across a fan one or we write one ourselves. We're like, oh yeah, someone's going to complain about this one. Some nerd's going to get real angry about this one. And I'm just like, yeah, whatever. That's how you know it's good though. That's how you know it's one of the good ones. Because like for every one person that'll be like, oh, I can't believe they would write that. I can't believe this is in this localization. There are also like 30 people that'll screenshot it on Twitter and be like, LMAO, I love it. You're like, yeah, that was for you, buddy. That was for all the people that are, you know, live sharing their experience of the game and giving them something to laugh and smile about. That's what it's all about. If I had to pick one that's public, like from 0, that's tough. I really like, I'm really proud of the Noelle one at Tangram Gate about Clarice Seeker wanting to raise a daughter that takes Noelle's. That one's all me. There are a lot of dumb ones in 0 that I like. Atterbury wrote the Soldier Boy one that's in Geofront B sector, where it's like support section off of this O. Watch me crank it, watch me roll, watch me crank that fan control. So like when you hit the correct demographic of people that get that reference and they're like, oh man, I hate this, but I also love it. I'm like, yeah, that's the reaction all of us had when that got written in testing. And it's really funny to watch people react to that one. How did you translate Azure that fast just 1 year after 0? I guess experience helps. So the editing process for Azure, since translation is done prior, I guess that's like a good question. Like, how did Azure happen in a year, whereas 0 took like 3.5 or something like that? There's no easy answer. I think there's definitely like multiple reasons that factor into it. I'd like to be a little arrogant and like selfish and be like, well, because I worked on it from day one, and like that's a little pompous, but at the same time, like there's some truth to that. Like I work really, really hard, and like I wrote 2/3 of Azure's first pass, and then I was responsible for all of its second pass, and it's I worked really, really freaking hard to do it all in a year. Or really, I guess like first pass to the end of second pass, it was more like 10 months. So, I mean, so definitely work ethic plays a role, but a lot of other things too. Like Zero's editing, for like the first 2 years of it, it was just Zerker. Mainly. Like there were some other people that like contributed a little bit, but like it was mainly Zerker. And bless his heart, like I don't think it's a secret, and he'll tell you it himself. Zerk burnt out, and like by I would say maybe like late 2018, or excuse me, like late 2018, because like the project was really like dragging its feet from like 2018 into 2019, and then Arvin came in, and Arvin works like a madman when he really wants to do something, so he just went ham for like 6 months, and Zero's first pass got done. It kind of got like a preliminary second pass through like much of the Crossbell City, which is like the bulk of Zero's text is in the city. And then testing started because he worked like crazy. So with Azure, we have more people on board. So we have 4 people. Zerk, Arvin, myself, and Atterbury. So we divided the scenario, non-scenario text between us. I would say like Zerk probably wrote like 10% or so of Azure's first pass. I feel like 2/3 is maybe generous. I probably wrote like 55 to 60% of the first pass, and then like 25% of it was probably Arvin, and the rest of it was Atterbury, who did all of the non-scenario, but also did like a good chunk of the scenario. He did a few locations in the scenario, like the border gates and Armorica village, namely. Oh, and in Mainz mining village as well. So us 4 working together made first pass go by really fast, and that was even after like we took a break for a little while, for like almost a month after the game got announced at 75%. Then second pass took like almost the exact same amount of time by like a day, but not as rigorous or as hard to do as the first pass, but because it was only me, it took the full 5 months rather than just like the 1 or 2 that I thought it might take when I first started, which was super stupid for me to think that. I quickly learned that that was not going to be the case working by myself, but you know, it is what it is. And a few other factors that go into it are obviously like a lot of people assume like, oh, the pandemic, everyone's at home and therefore they had nothing better to do. It's like, not really. I would say like my life, Arvin's life, and Zerk's life probably weren't affected that much by the pandemic. Like, I was already an introvert, so the pandemic, like, I'm a pretty nerdy, sheltered guy, so the pandemic is definitely like interrupted my life in the sense that like it kind of stalled what I was doing, because I kind of thought like after I graduated college in 2019 and like I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to go into like games journalism or something, and that didn't work out, and then like all this Geofront stuff happened, and then I went down the path of localization. So it probably like it's not so much that the pandemic changed my life as much as it kind of like delayed it. So like the amount of time I had didn't really change all that much. If anyone's life got impacted really hard, it was probably Atterbury's, because like not too far into the pandemic, he resigned from his job. Hopefully he doesn't mind me mentioning that he worked in retail, and was really unhappy about where he was working. So he had money saved up and he went on unemployment, resigned, whatever he did, and he had way more time to work on Geofront stuff in like all those months after that. So that probably definitely had an effect on the scenario parts he did, as well as all the non-scenario. And the other thing I mentioned in like the most recent article is the format change. The new format's just a lot cleaner. It helps workflow so much in that it's not ugly, confusing mess the way the old Zero one was. So I think that definitely contributed to us working a little bit quicker this time around. What's the worst bug left in Azure testing right now? I can't tell you. I mentioned some of the things that have to be done, like fixing the crossbell times and stuff like that. But a lot of like the worst things, the things that were like, this is so bad that no one can ever know about this or see it, like the sound looping bug, or some other scenes were getting just like destroyed by like weird visual glitches, typically tied to like changing the frame rate. Since the game was designed to run at 30, when you increase the frame rate and you have to support all the way up to 144, there are definitely some scenes that didn't like that. Some effects just don't like having the frame rate increase, so we had to fix that stuff. I think Jose has a lot of that stuff sorted out by now. So now it's just like fixing a litany of little things. I think there's like one visual graphic bug I know about that happens in the finale of the game that I don't think has been addressed. I'll probably have to wait until Jose gets to that part of the game, because he's actually currently playtesting it. I've retweeted that a couple of times on the Geofront account. So this is like how things really get fixed. Jose plays the game from start to finish, and anything that has not been addressed yet, he'll find it, and he'll do Jose things and come up with the best fix that he can. And that's how it worked for Zero, and it worked out pretty well, and he did that, and then we released the game not long after. That's how it works. How did the Geofront team actually come together in the first place? So there's a video that I made on my own channel that kind of like details it a little bit. It's the first video in my Trails from Zero playlist, my part 0 of my LP that went on hiatus. It's like, I can't remember how long that video is. It might be like 20 minutes or something. And it's basically just a podcast where I go into the history of like how Zero no Kiseki came to be fans translated in the first place. Not just the Geofront's history with it, but like everyone prior to the Geofront as well. And I think I did a pretty good job of documenting all of that, so I'm not going to go into like super detail now because it's definitely a very long story. But if you want to go check that out, then hit up my channel, Kill Scott Kill, Trails from Zero Part 0, and give a listen to that like little mini podcast, and you'll hear a little bit about the history of how Zero came to be and how the Geofront got formed. How did you manage your time and your team members? Have you encountered a bug glitch translation which was tricky to handle? How did you tackle this problem? What do you do on your free time? I'm terrible at time management. I think if I was good at it, I would probably be leading a much healthier life instead of just going as hard as possible for 10 months on Azure. Maybe not as hard as possible. There were probably like 2 to 3 major breaks in those 10 months. One was like right after we announced it. I probably took like a few weeks just to collect myself. Which is also, I believe, like when I finished playing Persona 5 Royal, or somewhere around that time. I think it was maybe a little after, actually. I played through, finished playing Persona 5 Royal. And then I took a break in this past fall when Trails of Cold Steel 4 came out, or before it came out, because I had a review copy of CS4. So I did that for like a straight month and a half to full sweep Cold Steel 4 and like study it and learn all of the things that we needed to know about its localization to help us. So that was an experience. But yeah, I'm really bad at time management. I tend to go, when I'm motivated to work, I tend to go really ham until I burn out, and then I take some time off, and then I go really ham again. I can't manage like how hard they work. Like sometimes I can nag them and be like, hey, don't forget to do the thing. Like, hey, do this bug report. But like I can remind them of stuff, but I can't make them do anything. It's all, at the end of the day, voluntary, and they'll get to it when they get to it, just like I will. And what do I do in my free time? I think people who like follow me on Twitter know that I really love PC stuff. I'm a big time PC hardware nerd, so the things I'm interested in like outside of like games and Falcom stuff and stuff like that is a lot of PC news. I watch tons of people in like the PC enthusiast community on YouTube. I watch all the big people. Like I watch Linus Tech Tips and JC Sense and Bitwit and Paul's Hardware. A few other smaller people like Tech City Yes. Let me open my YouTube subscriptions. This is Hardware Unboxed, so I really like. There are a few smaller channels that I've started following recently. BPS Customs, although he's not like tiny, so like 100 to 200,000 subscribers or something. Hardware Canucks, Kit Guru Tech, they're really good. Level 1 Techs, Wendell is awesome. A small channel that I follow in PC community is called No Nonsense PC. Can't remember the name of the guy who runs that channel, but he makes really good content. Even though he has a pretty small channel, I really like him in like the videos he does. He's done like some stuff about like case fans, which is like not the sexiest topic in the world of like PC building, but it's kind of like hard stuff to come across. It's really good. And also, of course, Gamers Nexus. If you ever want to like feel smart and like a lot about how PC hardware works and how it performs and stuff, watch Gamers Nexus and you'll feel smarter about yourself, even though a lot of it will go right over your head. Also, for myself and like other people on the team, at least like a couple members, if there's a game we like to play between ourselves with each other, it's Rocket League. I don't know how Rocket League became the Geofront game of choice of like it's time to goof off and do something completely different than like Geofront work or like Falcom stuff. For some reason it's Rocket League, even though we suck at it. We're not good at all. But yeah, like every day we probably put like a couple hours into Rocket League just to wind down. Who is best girl excluding Noelle? Wazi, obviously. To ask a better question. Thank God that was even hard. Do you think there will be any post-release patches for Azure? Probably one. Like I said, maybe like a hot fix, maybe two. I'm not sure. I can't tell the future, and a lot of that will obviously come down to what Jose and Ribos find once the game goes public. As I'm sure if Zero's anything to go by, we'll probably find a whole litany of problems wrong with the game once everyone else has it. Like, we try our best with, like, between ourselves and our testers, but, like, PC games are hard because, like, everyone has different hardware. Like, almost no two setups are the same between desktop PCs and laptops, low-end power laptops. People trying to play the game on, like, Wine, on Mac or Linux, and stuff like that. You never know what's going to come out of the woodwork. So, like, I'm definitely concerned that we're going to release the game and everyone on low-power laptops that are using Intel integrated graphics could have a hard time. I don't know. I think we have like 1 or 2 testers that are playing with Intel integrated graphics, and that kind of gives us an idea of like what to expect. But once that goes from like 2 people to hundreds of people, that's when you really start learning things, and that's what happened with Zero, and we had to update Zero a month after the fact to improve performance on those kind of systems, and I just can't tell the future, but I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens with Azure. What's the silliest thing you had to change after Trails of Cold Steel 4's release in English? I don't know about silliest, but when Cold Steel 4 came out in English for launched on PS4, there were definitely like inconsistencies with Cold Steel 3, which Nisa is definitely aware of, because I'm sure our fans pointed out to them, and I pointed it out to them as well. I passed things along privately to people I know that are like on the public-facing side of it, not so much the localization side, but like if you reach out to people at Nisa on their like Discord stuff, probably not helpful now because they probably moved on from Cold Steel 4 for the most part. Like, I imagine they will update the PS4 version very soon, and obviously all that stuff's going to be built into the Switch and PC versions when those launch. But like generally, like when they put out a new game, if you like contact the right people on like the public facing side and be like, I have some like text bug corrections, there are some typos or like weird things, they tend to pass it along to the people whose job it is to like actually work with that stuff. And they're really good about like taking that feedback and fixing it. They did that with Cold Steel 3. They're doing it with 4. So there were some like weird inconsistencies with like a couple of NPCs that are in Crossbell City just were not named the same across Cold Steel 3 and 4, which is like a oops. And we're like what happened there? And there was like one organization, the Business Owners Association, was not named consistently across Cold Steel 3 and 4. So it's like little stuff like that where it's like, because no one pays closer attention to those kinds of things in Crossbell than we do, obviously. So like when we started seeing these inconsistencies, we would pull our hair out. We're like, you're driving us crazy, Nisa. Which one is it? Pick a thing. And so we've been keeping our like ear to the ground and like looking for their CS4 update stuff, you know, to make sure that Zero and Azure have the correct ones for the things they're picking and stuff like that. Did the Geofront team have a localization kit for the game, or did you guys use another method? Like, no, we did. By localization kit, I mean, I assume you mean like official thing, like what real localizations are made on. No, I wish. That'd be really nice if Falcom was like, here you go, here are the files that you need. Luckily, the EDD compiler is very clean and easy to work with, so that's how it was done to take the text out of the game. And anything beyond that, you'd have to ask Jose and Ribos how that works, because I don't know, I just make the text look pretty. They know way more about the technical stuff than I do. Can we have a list of chess messages you find good but cannot put in the patch for some reason? Definitely there's some where people will suggest something. One thing we had happen in some of the Azure submissions where people would be like, oh, this would be a really good idea for a New Game Plus chest. And there are none in Azure. There were in Zero, but none in Azure. For a little while, we actually thought that there might be some in Azure. There are like 2 or 3 chests in the game that give you Master Quartz. And if you already have the Master Quartz, because the Master Quartz is able to carry over from playthrough to playthrough, then the next time you open that chest, you'll get like a high-level rare quartz instead of a Master Quartz. So the text on the spreadsheet for those chests, we thought that there were like 2 different "the chest is empty" messages, for one for the Master Quartz and one for the rare quartz. So the logic there was like, well, if it's the chest is empty for the rare quartz, therefore, like, you can only see that if you have the Master Quartz, which means you're a New Game Plus, because you played the game at least once already and got that Master Quartz. So we had written / picked out a few chest messages that were going to be New Game Plus exclusive, and then we found out that that's not actually how it works, and that Falcom like duplicated text for no reason on their spreadsheets, and that even though each of those Master Quartz chests, those chests and where they appear in the scenario, the text that's associated with them, even though it has like 2 sets of text of like, because I believe they're all in monster chests as well. So you have like the line of like, you know, open the chest, they're high-level monsters attacked, and then the string for you got the item, and then the final string of the chest is empty. So it has 2 sets of these, and we have 2 the chest is empty text boxes. It turns out that the game doesn't actually use both of them. It only uses one of them. So we had to scrap the idea of doing like cheeky New Game Plus chests in those locations, which is really unfortunate. I guess I can answer this. Why Noel? What, I can't just like Noel? I like Noelle Seeker. I think the way we wrote Noelle, or the way I wrote Noelle, because I definitely was like super nitpicky in particular about like how she's always written in Zero and Azure. I like the way we characterize her, and that Noelle's just a real fun character to me. I admire who she is as a person. I admire that she's really patriotic and that she loves her state, even though Crossspell is like obviously a huge underdog on like the geopolitical scale, and is definitely bullied around by Ereboni and Calvard. So I like that despite all that, she's as patriotic as can be, to the point where she's like kind of naive and oblivious. Noelle's kind of the bimbo on the team, to be honest. Noelle's kind of stupid, and I love that about her. Like, she real dumb, and I like to write her like that. I like to turn into that skid and just like punch up her character of like how goofy and clueless she can be at times when she isn't like being like a real serious and like straight arrow soldier person. And I also really enjoy like punching up her love for things outside of work, like namely cars. In Azure, there's a lot of opportunities to poke fun at her love of cars and how much of a gearhead she is, and just how clueless she can be about all sorts of things. Like, one of my favorite things about Noelle, and it's kind of unfortunate because I think some of Noelle's best character development happens outside of the main story and happens in a lot of like optional interactions. I love writing Noelle interacting with her family, be it Fran or her mother Clarice, because Noelle gets bullied by her family all the time because they like really tease her and pick on her, and I love writing those interactions. On this, I believe it's the second day of chapter 1. A little bit of a pro tip: if you go see Fran on that day, you get bonding points for Fran. All of the ancillary characters in the game kind of have a bonding system, to where if like you talk to them at enough points and interact with them and get enough of their optional scenes, then at the end of the game you can get a really good accessory from them. Fran's one of those characters, so she has like a bonding point scene in day 2 of chapter 1 that's about like her and Noelle and like the dynamic they have in their relationship now that Noelle is like technically working with her. She's part of the SSS in this game. And it's a really funny interaction. It's one that I wrote like actually before I was in the Geofront. It was something I kind of had like written a rough outline of back when I was like kind of playing around with the idea of someday getting to work on Al, when I was like trying to get in Zerker and Ribos's good graces, and it eventually carried over when we officially started working on Al last year. It's a great scene that I'm really proud of, so make sure to do that one, please. I'm really proud of that one. Having done Zero previously, are there any differences in the translation process, e.g. like if the program used couldn't parse Joyland's code? No, I mean, the two are really similar. There are definitely like differences between the two. Like I've said in multiple articles now that like getting the Geofront mod to work with Azure is not drag and drop. Like obviously there are a lot of bugs introduced, but there were some things that like did work basically day one or close to it when we started working on Azure. Like the settings menu worked, the message log pretty much worked out of the gate, stuff like that. But a lot of other things, especially like a lot of the more like minutia, it has to have separate fixes, things tied to performance and all those sorts of things. And there's like an additional layer of complication, being that that this isn't a Japanese version. This is the Chinese version, whereas Zero is built on the Japanese version. So there's some like additional complications that come along with that Ribos and Jose could tell you more about. How long do you plan to sleep once Azure finally drops? Not a lot. If it was anything like Zero, I couldn't sleep the night that we released Zero last year, and I was up all night helping people or just reading their reactions. I'm sure Azure is going to be just the same, and I feel like there's not going to be a lot of rest for the weary, because even once this is done, it's kind of like, all right, what's next? other things I want to do. And plus my life outside of the Geofront's been picking up and getting really busy. So I'm sure I'm going to be a very busy person this year. Was there anything the team struggled to agree on along the lines of the CPD versus the CSPD? For Azure, there are definitely things we argue about and have disagreements on about, like, features. I don't want to get like too far into it and like expose Geofront drama for the world or anything, but like I was definitely a very difficult person to work with when it came to making sure the HD video mod was in for Zero in Azure, because it's important to me. It's I'm glad to see a lot of people appreciate it. It definitely makes me feel like the work that went into doing that was worth it. It's something I'm really passionate about. Some other things, I don't know. I think we can definitely bump heads from time to time because it's hard to. It's definitely hard to work with people when you're not right there with each other. We're all remote and live far away from one another. We have people like northeast on the East Coast. We have people in the middle of the country. We have people in the south, and then we have people all the way across the ocean. We have our lead programmer and graphic designer are Spanish. So we have people all over the place, and that complicates things, I think. It makes communication a little bit harder. Like, obviously we're all connected online, but I do think not having that extra layer of like getting to sit down and talk to one another or have meetings, and a lot of the times we're all at awake at different hours and stuff like that, it can make things difficult, and sometimes communication breaks down, and it turns out that something that you thought one person was going to do or that they understood turns out that wasn't communicated well, and just things happen. That's the way it is for I think any big team attempting a huge project, no matter what it is, and it's true for us too. What keeps you and the team motivated? Doing projects like this for sure has its ups and downs, but how do you guys push past it? I mean, for me, it's how much I really love OW. This is my favorite game ever made, so that's a pretty big motivator when I'm like, yeah, I'm going to give the world a really good version of this game come hell or high water. So that's a big motivator. And I think we have to have that because, like, unfortunately, I wish there was a paycheck at the end of the month for all of the work that goes into Geofront Azure. I really wish there was, but there's not. But, you know, what can you do? That's just the nature of the beast. We all knew what we were signing up for. So when it's not paying your rent and stuff like that, how else do you stay motivated? It's definitely being passionate about the thing that you're doing and wanting it to be really good and believing that it's really important work, because I certainly think it's really important. What's been the biggest difference on working on Azure compared to Zero? The biggest difference, I feel like someone like Zerk or Arvin, well, I guess Ribos and Jose would also be super equipped to answer this question. Like, I can't answer it on their behalf, but I imagine for them it would be something along the lines of, for them, obviously Zero was like a 3 to 4 year process where the work they were doing on Zero and like the basis of like what Geofront Zero was going to be in terms of like a feature set as a mod, in terms of the things it was going to have, quality of life and all of that stuff. They were, in doing that, they were also laying the groundwork for a potential Azure project, and I'm sure they knew that from the start. So with Azure, there's been a lot less. Oh, in the video just now, you see that I pointed at Noelle's name tag, and that's because in the middle of this scene, when Lloyd agrees to stop calling her Sergeant Major Seeker and start calling her Noelle, her name tag changes. And that's not our doing, that's how Falcom designed it. And that's because Noelle's name in Azure is an EXE string, which means it's kind of like separate from the scenario. A lot of the name tags in the game are contained in an NPC table that's built along with our scenario. But some other names in the game aren't. They're held in the exe string file, which I think in the games directory is like exe.csv. So Noelle's name is in there, and it's like dynamic, so it knows when to switch it over and start calling her Noelle for the rest of the game. Just wanted to point that out. So, I mean, yeah, definitely for them, getting back to the question, that with Azure, it's been less about adding things the way Zero was and more fixing things and just making sure that what they had already created would work on this new project. And just for the editors, I'm sure it's been the speed of everything, that it's been a sprint for the last, now going on 13 months when we started. And it hasn't really let up. It's slowed down a little bit during testing, but it's definitely been a sprint to the finish line. Someone asks whether or not any of their chest messages are used. I don't know. We don't like to tell people because we like to keep it a secret. And give people like a reason to play the game and like find out, did your chest make it in or not? Find out by playing the game. Or I guess you could wait until on Trails in the database. I suppose that's an option if you can remember how you wrote it, but even then the chests that we accept from other people tend to go through like rewording and reformatting so that it's more friendly to like the way it's going to look in the game. So we make sure it's like style guide compliant. We make sure if it's using terminology that the terms are consistent, stuff like that. So you'd have to maybe not remember your submission verbatim, but remember like the spirit of it. Because sometimes people like have a good one that's like along the lines of a really good chest, but we'll have to like massage it and tweak it a little bit. And then we get a message that's like good enough to put in the game. That happens from time to time. What is your best recommended method to play this on a Mac? Parallels or Boot Camp? As far as I know, like obviously if you're using Boot Camp and booting into Windows, that will work for sure. I'm definitely not the person to ask. I think strives have been made to where it should work with Wine and stuff like that, because I know that changes in Zero made Linux compatibility much better. And from what I've heard from our resident Linux user on our Discord server, that Azure didn't give him any problems when he first started testing it. So that might carry over into like using something like Wine on Mac. I'm not entirely sure. That'll definitely be once it's out, maybe Ask Ribos type of thing. What do we plan to do after Trails to Azure is released? I wish we could all go on a big vacation, but we'll probably just keep doing what we're doing. Take a bunch of feedback, and if there's time, do a hotfix technically and with the text. And once that's done, probably focus on East Versus. I know, I believe Ribos' expertise will be called on there. I think he'll help out a little bit with the programming stuff. And there might be some time for myself and Atterbury to contribute a little bit with the testing there to help out Sly and Livy, who are the lead editors of that project, because they helped us out with Azure a lot by testing the game. So we definitely feel like we owe it to them. So hopefully there's time for that. But there are also some other things on like the down low, you know, other Geofront projects that are beginning to come in the works that we are looking to hopefully make some headway on once Azure's done. On one of your videos for Zero, you mentioned a line of NPC dialogue that was in the original Japanese script wildly out of character. Were there similarly odd lines in Azure or any fun anecdotes about inconsistencies from Zero? I believe I know what you're referring to, and I can't remember if I said it in the video. The NPC in question is Letty or Leedy, however you pronounce her name. Cecile's mother, the one that Lloyd refers to as his aunt. She had a line in Zero where she kind of like talks about like Cecile, you know, like finding a boyfriend or a husband or whatever, and like just the way she delivered it in Japanese seemed to like lack a bunch of tact in front of like Lloyd's face, because it's like damn lady, like you know that Cecile's ex-fiance was this guy's brother who was murdered, right? So like what she said was like, we kind of thought was like a little inconsiderate, and it didn't seem like intentional or anything. It kind of just seemed like whoever wrote that bit of scenario at Falcom just like didn't think that it could be construed that way, that like someone might interpret it that way. So we might, I can't remember exactly what we wrote, but we might have like toned it down just a little bit because we didn't think that was the intent of the line in the first place. In Azure, I don't really know. I can't. The simple question, or the simple answer, and there's a question that I hopefully will get to. Maybe not in the video, maybe it'll be later, but the NPC dialogue in Azure is kind of lackluster, and that's where you really see the fact that Falcom was hard pressed to turn this game around a year after Zero. Is they did a good job of like writing the scenario to be like really hype. There are definitely like crazy high moments in Azure, but you can kind of tell that the NPCs just didn't have enough time or care put into them, so they're kind of toned down in this game, and they're very repetitive in certain phases where a lot of the NPCs will just kind of say the same thing, because there are a lot of big current events in Azure. What ends up happening is a lot of NPCs, especially in the city, will be like, oh, did you hear about big thing? Big thing, wow, big news, big news. You just have like 3 or 4 phases in the game that are just like that for almost every NPC in the city, and it's not a lot of fun to write and not a lot of fun to test. Is there going to be Japanese support? Yeah, I addressed that in the intro part that I recorded yesterday. There should be, but I think you're going to have to... People that are interested in it are going to have to supply those files themselves. Might be like directly from a PSP version of Al. I'm not entirely sure. That'll definitely be maybe ask Ribos or Jose on Discord once the game is out, and they will probably be able to answer that. And there might be some people that can hook you up with those files. We're not going to be able to provide them, but you know, I don't think it's a huge deal. If you really want to get the Japanese scenario in, it should be possible. Who's your favorite character to write/translate for? I think Wazzy. Wazzy's a lot of fun in this game. Look at that HD video. That's some good stuff right there. Because Wazzy gets obviously so much more screen time in Azure than he does in Zero. So I really felt like I got to control like Wazzy as a character far more than we ever did in Zero. And yeah, he's just a lot of fun. I really like my Wazzy. I really like how we have written his character arc in this game and like the main conflict he goes through. I'm really proud of it, and I look forward to seeing people play it and what their reactions to it will be, because I think it's going to be one of the most unique things about Geofront Azure versus any other version of Al that's floating around out there. I think we handled it in a very clever way, and I'm very proud of it. Are there any plans to do a localization for the Gagharf trilogy on Windows somewhere down the line, or will Geofront stop at Azure and East versus Trails? So I've already alluded to that there are projects beyond Azure and East versus. If I had to put a number on it, this is the big scoop for you guys. I would say there are 4 unannounced Geofront projects that are like tangible in terms of work has begun on them, and we can see them actually like being a thing that gets worked on and gets done someday. Because every now and then, like, a project will not like quote unquote start, but we'll have people kind of like dip their toes in the water of like, maybe this would be interesting to do, and then we like see about like getting text out of a game or whatever the files for a certain project would pertain to, but we don't necessarily have a way to like actually like start a project with it. Like a retro game, it might be possible to like get the text, but we don't have any way of like programming it or like inserting the text. So like sometimes that happens, but there are 4 things going on right now. in the process of being translated and could theoretically become Geofront projects in full someday. Within, I don't even want to put a time on it because I have no idea when, but they are more viable and possible than just a maybe. And I'm not going to say what they are. I will say that when I say 4 things, it doesn't necessarily mean they're all video games. They might be something different. I think some of it could surprise some people. So keep an eye out for it. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm sure there will be an announcement of one of those things eventually, sometime this year. A couple of them I'm pretty sure are going to like get talked about. And the only reason we haven't talked about it really yet is because it's like, let's not talk about those things until Azure and these verses are done. But like, once we make good on those, then we can talk about something else that like our translators have been working on, because it's not like it's ground up Geofront project. It's not like taking something that someone else has already done and improving upon it. It's like a ground up from scratch project. All of them are. So look forward to whenever that stuff gets talked about. Hell's Eye, who I know, asked, which was worse, the Anniversary Festival or the rain, which is alluding to the NPC problem. Again, this is the question I was thinking about. So what this question is really asking is like, we kind of made a stink, or we joke around the Geofront, the editors and the testers, about how rough the Anniversary Festival from Zero is in terms of like the NPCs and full sweeping the game, writing them and testing them, because Falcom kind of like phoned in the NPCs from Zero during the festival, where it's like 4 days straight of people just being like, wow, the Anniversary Festival, huh? And the dialogue is really unimaginative. So we've kind of alluded to, like on Discord and talking to like people we know and fans and stuff like that, that Azure kind of suffers from the same problem, and that there's like 3 or 4 Anniversary Festivals in this game, where the same problem I alluded to, where people just talk about current events rather than, you know, like have interesting personal stories going on in their own lives. The NPCs will just talk about the current event. I feel like the Anniversary Festival, like solitarily, is probably like the worst it's ever been. But the fact that there are so many phases like that in Azure really hurts like the NPC writing in this game, and I think is unquestionably not as good as it was in Zero. And we certainly tried to make it as good as we can, and a lot of care went into tightening up the NPCs. I got to, you know, like write and test so much of the NPC dialogue in this game, and I did the best I could, but Falcom didn't make it easy, to be honest. I'm currently going through the list of questions. A lot of these are, you know, along the lines of things I've answered one way or another. Let's see. A real basic one, people ask, will there be a save transfer between Zero and Azure? How will it work? I showed that off in the intro part. People often ask us, like, I have saves for OWL from the other translations, from the Flame Edit or whatever version. Will it work? The answer is yes. At the end of the day, it's still the Joyland version. It's still the Joyland PC port of OWL no Kiseki, so it will work. With Zero, Ribos designed a system to where you could even convert PSP saves directly to PC, and it would just work. You didn't have to go through a special process. It would just read it and know what to do. And I believe the same is true for OWL, so if you have an OWL PSP save, I believe it should work with Trails to Azure as well. So, like, yeah, that kind of stuff is like, you'll be fine. Like, we've seen some people that are like, well, if I start the Flame Edit and then I switch to the Geofront version halfway through, will it work? And then I read that and I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, there's some people that are crazy. It's like switching to a completely different game halfway through. It's very strange that anyone would want to do that. But hey, that's their prerogative, I guess. But like, the answer is like, yes, if for some reason you wanted to do that, it would work. The save format is ultimately the same. When and how did you get into the Trails series? I've answered this like on like my personal channel before, but nothing special. Like a lot of people, I'm not OG. I wasn't around for like back in the days where like almost it was impossible to get Falcom games in English, and like we obviously have some elder statesmen in the community that have got into Falcom because they were playing Japanese Falcom games. And we have people in the Trails community that have been around since the beginning, back when Xseed released Trails in the Sky on PSP in 2011. But not me. I'm a Zoomer, so I got in with Cold Steel 1's release on Vita and PS3 by complete happenstance. It was not like it wasn't anyone or any friends being like, you got to play this or anything like that. It was just, I liked the Vita. I wanted to play a good JRPG on the Vita. Cold Steel 1 had good reviews, so I played it. And that was it. So I didn't start at Sky. I started at Cold Steel by just complete coincidence. Like I kind of had an idea that like they were in the same universe, but I had no idea like how connected the series was or anything like that back then. So I just played the one that was in front of me before eventually going back to the start and playing through all of them in order and stuff like that. And that's how I got into Trails. So we're at the end of the prologue. So I will try to get to like one or two more questions. We're like basically at the end. Let's see, this one's about the OP, which I went into depth about the video. Man, we got to like everything. I'm impressed that I managed to answer mostly all of these, at least the ones I have as of Thursday morning. So here are a couple of good ones, and I'll try to answer both of them in the time I have, and like loop in. I will loop the end of this video or add a little bit extra to the end of it to make sure there's time. How has fan criticism of certain lines in Zero affected your approach of editing Azure? That's a good question. I want to say first and foremost, like Zero and Azure aren't the same. Zero is mainly edited by Zerk. 2/3 of it was Zerk, 1/3 of it was Arvin. And like, I definitely edited parts of Zero. There are things I can point to, especially in the final patch, where like my fingerprints are on Zero. If you want to talk about Zero upon release, if there's a part of Zero that was all me, pretty much all me, I wrote the final version that was in the game, it would be during Chapter 3, the day where you learn about the Hayworth's backstory. From the moment when they find Colin on West Crossbell Highway, all the way to when they go back to the SSS, the closet scene with Ren in the closet, hearing the whole story, and when Estelle and Joshua visit the SSS that evening, I wrote that entire section that was in the release version of Trails from Zero. That was kind of like my mark on that game. So, but Azure's different. Azure was mainly me, and I'm not Zerk, and I'm not Arvin. I'm different from them. Try as hard as we can to make them as consistent with the two games, consistent with each other as we possibly can. There are going to be details that are different. I think people with really keen eyes and that really know the games, the versions we put out really well, will be able to kind of like spot the difference in terms of like the editing style, if you really have an eye for that sort of thing. So, because I'm not Zerk and I'm not Arvin, I edit a little differently. I think I'm a little more conservative than them in certain instances. I think I'm a little bit more conservative in voice acted scenes, to be quite honest with you. Some people will like that. Some people won't. Either way, like I'm fine with it. I'm happy with how I wrote the game. But if you're asking us of like, oh, is the Geofront going to take the criticism of how they localize certain things and walk it back? The answer is like, not really. Like, I have my own style, but at the same time, like in some instances where I can be more conservative than them, there are other times where I push the boundary more than them. If you're asking me whether or not Randy's going to say bruh in Trails to Azure, the answer is he is. He says it twice. Most of you will see one of those instances. The dedicated of you will see the other. One of them will pretty much be free. The other one you got to earn. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, like, it's our games and we write the characters the way that we like them. And I've definitely taken criticism to heart because, to be honest, some of the criticism for Trails from Zero, some of it I agree with because I didn't write it and I would have done things differently. And then I did do things differently with obviously with Azure, but to some extent with Zero's 1.1 patch. There were some things that got changed in there, and people that bothered to go back and play it will maybe spot some of that. I don't know. But I definitely listened to feedback and criticism. Some of it I've taken, some of it I just ignore because, quite frankly, sometimes people don't know what they're talking about. But I listen to everything, and I guess you'll all see when you play it. Some other big questions. I think there are like 3 big ones I want to answer for you in this video. One of them is like, we had a few people reach out and be like, how do I join the Geofront? Like, I'll probably talk about this on Twitter too. Not outside of the realm of possibility. We might be looking for people this year. We have a lot on our plates. If you're a translator from Japanese to English and you would like to get into some volunteer localization work, either because you're passionate about it, you think it's fun, or if you just want to build experience and like maybe find a way to like, get into the localization industry someday. If you want to contribute, reach out to me or one of us. We'll hear you out. We can't promise anything, but we'd be interested to hear from you. Same goes for editors. I think it's a decent chance we'll be looking for at least one new editor this year. We definitely have we keep tabs on people and like we know people in network and we think like, oh, this person might be good for it. They're really passionate. I wonder if they'd be interested. So like, we have names in mind, but if you think you're qualified, let us know. In this sort of thing, it's also very much about like who you know. So much about people who have worked on Geofront projects is really more of a chemistry thing in terms of not just like, do you have a resume or are you as good as you claim to be, but like, can someone vouch for you? Do you know one of us personally? And can they refer you and make sure that you're the real deal and that you'll be not just a hard worker, but, someone who's passionate and easy to get along with. Those sort of things come into play. And the same goes for anything. Like if you're really interested in programming or graphics or whatever, if you think you have a passion for it, never hurts to reach out to us and talk to one of us about it. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is we say, no thanks, not right now, but it's nice meeting you. That's the worst thing that could happen. And you never know when things change. And let me find another one. Someone asked me a really good question. I think it was this person. I can't find it, but let me look in their tweets. Okay, here it is. If in Xseed or someone said, hey, we've now got the rights to Zero and Azure, can we buy your script? Would Geofront consider it? This is an important question because it's one that I lurk a lot. I read what people say on Twitter, on Reddit, on Discord. I may not say a whole lot, but I read a whole lot. I read what the community says. And I've seen this topic come up a lot, and people will cite things and say things like, the Geofront says they will never sell. They would never agree to something like that. That's not true. Myself, Zerker, other people, editors, programmers, the people who put the most work in on Geofront Zero and Azure have never hid the fact that that would be a dream come true. The whole reason we ever did what we did with Zero and Azure is because we wanted the games to be in English. And we wanted them to be good in English, like official good. That was why we did what we did. And it's just that simple. So if something like that were to ever happen, that'd be a dream come true. But one thing that has always been stated when this topic comes up is the skepticism that could ever happen because of how complicated the Geofront's projects are in terms of who actually stakes claim to own the text. because it's like 3 to 4 original translators on both games, and then a host of people who have edited it on behalf of the Geofront. And do you count programmers? Like, if such an arrangement were to happen, would people who worked on the text be the only ones to like claim ownership over it? What about programmers? What about graphic designers and so many other people? At the end of the day, Geofront Zero and Azure, each project is like 1 to 2 dozen people that have contributed in some way over the span of like what's now 5 or 6 years. I think like 5 years or so is like when original Zero is like getting off the ground in like 2016, I think. Watch the part 0 Trails from Zero video, and I'm sure my memory is probably way better in that video than it is now. So we've always expressed skepticism that such a thing could happen. But I got asked this question the last time I did something like this last year when we announced Azure. Someone asked me a similar question. And I said something along the lines of like, absolutely, I'm 100% down for cooperating with any publisher for any reason, be it Zero and Azure, be it Geofront related or not. I'm always up for that. That would be awesome to work with a real video game publisher in any capacity. But just like I said then, it would be a complicated issue figuring out how that would ever work with the Geofront's projects. And I'm glad that's not my job. That's way above what I do. That would the onus would fall on some third party to sort out that mess and find out if it's even feasible, because I couldn't tell you. But I know that there have been things said, like on Reddit. I'm not here to throw anyone under the bus, but I think Floofy has had some words like on the Falcom subreddit in the past of like whether or not that sort of thing would ever happen. And I think she has said like, no, Floofy doesn't speak on behalf of the Geofront. She doesn't speak on behalf of Zerker and all the work he put in on Trails from Zero. She doesn't speak on my behalf on Trails to Azure. Azure's my thing. Azure's the project I led. Floofy owns Assyrier.net, the Geofront's host. And yeah, she's a founding member and had something to do with the early stages of Trails from Zero's development. But I'm sure she would tell you if you asked her that like there came a time not too far into Zero's development where she stepped back and it became other people's thing. It became Zerker's thing and Ribos's thing, and then eventually Kata's thing and Arvin's thing. And Azure has been mine and Ada's thing and Jose's thing, like, and Ribos's, and like, we're the Geofront. And as far as I'm concerned, the people that have put in the crazy amount of work to make Zero and Azure actually come out, and that were there for both games and have put in the blood, the sweat, and the tears, we've never been opposed to it, but we've always been understandably skeptical that anything like that could ever happen, though it would be a dream come true. And I guess the final question to answer, the one I intentionally left for last. People ask me, when's it coming out? When's it coming out? Just to be mean, I made sure to keep this last because I don't know. I'm sorry, but there's no answer. We're not a company. We're not hiding a release date from you guys. It's not like we have an internal memo of like, haha, it's actually April 14th, but we won't tell them. Like, no, we don't know. You'll eat when the food is ready. That's what I've been saying to people on Twitter for like, 6 to 8 months now or whatever. You'll eat when the food is ready. When it's done, when we feel like we've done enough to where it's in a state to where it can release, we'll probably put out an announcement and be like, hey, it's going to come out in like a week or whatever, and then we'll release it. We're getting closer. I feel a lot better about it today than I did at this time a month ago, that's for sure. There are a lot of major bugs that got finished this month because of Jose kicking it into high gear and starting his playthrough and whatnot. So he's been fixing a lot of these like weird, bizarre issues that the game has had, while Ribos has been going through the small checklist of things to make sure all these smaller things work the way they're supposed to. And they're doing it. If you see them on Twitter or Discord or whatever, let them know that you appreciate them. Give them a word of encouragement. Don't pester them and be like, when's it coming out? Just be like, thanks. Good job, guys. Keep it up. Hopefully they don't mind that. Because that's about all I can do at this point, too. Is just be patient. Trust them to do what they do best. And hopefully sometime in the near future we'll have good news for all of you. I'm telling you, Azure hits different when this game comes out. It's going to change a lot of things. Man, I can't wait. I can't wait to see people's reaction and all the live playthroughs and the streams and the screenshots on Twitter and Discord and whatnot. I can't wait. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Well, I think that wraps it up. I pretty much answered all the questions I have thus far. I'll probably get more in the next couple of days or so by the time of whenever I post this. So I'll try to answer those on the internet, on like Twitter and stuff like that. If there's anything super important I didn't touch on, feel free to ask me somewhere. If I feel like I already answered it in the video, I might not respond though. So if you didn't watch the whole thing, that's not my fault. That's pretty much it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you're looking forward to it. I hope you can be just a little bit more patient. We're getting there. We're really getting there. See you guys later.